What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today when I talk to you about Lucid, I want to go over some expectations for this upcoming week, what might cause some volatility in the stock price, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. So starting off with data points, oddly enough, there isn't that much coming out this week that could impact the market. Near the second half of the week, though, you do have a couple of Fed speakers, and depending on what they state, that could really move the market. But essentially, it is going to come down to one of pretty much two things. Tariffs. So if we are going to see any kind of retaliation or any updates as far as tariffs, that of course will move the market, because Friday we did have a very notable increase in fear because of those tariffs. A lot of big companies has been really citing that these tariffs is going to cause significant impacts to their balance sheet. So again, that's going to be something to really watch for, even with these companies unveiling their earnings for this upcoming week. So a lot of big names, and a lot of which are essentially impacted by the tariffs as well. So when it comes down to this is going to be the second point to really watch for, and that's companies unveiling their earnings. And then yours truly, Tuesday after hours, so that's going to be a big one. So Lucid unveiling their earnings. But even aside from that, a lot of these companies are very speculative in nature and have been doing very well. But as a byproduct, they do have a very high multiple. So I feel like Wall Street has been really waiting for a lot of these names, especially Palantir, to fail. So if Palantir, for whatever reason, does flop on their earnings, and even aside from that, a lot of these companies giving bad future guidance, then Wall Street is going to really shout, say, hey, I told you. And that is going to just increase the fear so much. So that most likely is going to really impact the market. I'll kind of go over some vague expectations for Lucid's earnings in a second. But one thing that did happen because of Friday's increase in fear was the likelihood of a cut for the September 17th meeting. Now it is 80.3% likelihood of a 25 basis point cut. So at the end of the day, that is a good thing, but I do feel like the Wall Street did not price this in. So once the fear does momentarily subside, you might have a lot of growth stocks start to move really higher because of this. And even the EV sector as well, very beneficial for lower rates. But from what we can see so far on the crypto market, which is a good representation of people's appetite for risk, it looks as though many of them are kind of going down over the last 24 hours. So it is fair to assume that the fear is still there. So something to keep in mind. But like I said, Lucid's earnings, that one's going to be a fairly big one. And so I want to go over some expectations. So starting off, implied move is 11.42%. So that is roughly like a 30-cent move in either direction. So you can kind of see this data right here, which goes all the way back to February 28th, 2022. Ultimately, this column, so the one-day move, does show how Lucid did move after the earnings. And so ultimately, only 2 quarters in the eyes of Wall Street were positive, and one caused a 3% move, other one a 12.17. Most of the time it does go down about between like 10 to 15%, which is rather unfortunate. But Wall Street, in all fairness, has been very lenient on Lucid, because normally when it comes down to earnings, a lot of which there's a lot of dependence on these metrics. So earnings per share, right now the estimate is negative 22 cents, and then the revenue is 264.74 million. Over the last 90 days, you have 8 positive and 1 negative revisions to the earnings per share. So again, yes, these do matter in a lot of cases, but I feel like Wall Street has really cared about Lucid's future guidance. How are they handling everything? And this earnings, I think, is going to be another one of those kind of scenarios where Wall Street is really going to place a lot of importance on Lucid's future guidance, such as, can they actually, and are they going to reiterate their 20,000 target? How is the Gravity going? Is there supply chain issues? How is that Uber deal partnership going to work out? Why are they going to do a reverse stock split? That is exactly what Wall Street is really going to be looking for, because maybe to retail investors and to some institutions, that whole reverse stock split just doesn't make sense. And keep in mind, a lot of analysts are going to be paying very close attention to how things are worded as well. Sometimes I know I get hate on how I interpret things as well, like for instance, how Peter said a certain thing or whatever else. But if Mark and management kind of just pass over the whole reverse stock split and just say, hey, yeah, we're doing it because of just to increase whatever institutional presence, that is going to be seen as a very big negative, because I feel like more explanation does need to be given. And even aside from that though, Mark really did hype up this earnings, such as, and kind of alluded to, a partnership. So real question is the Uber deal that partnership, or is there another one? So that is exactly some of the things that Wall Street is going to be looking for and will interpret as a positive. So that's going to be something that really does move Lucid. And then the retail posed questions, I don't have any expectations for this. So you have this one right here. So in the past, Lucid has always asked between 3 to 5, and it is all dependent on, in my opinion, and this might be blunt and rather straightforward, but depending on the kind of complexity of these questions, that's a nice way of putting it, I guess. If a lot of these questions are worded poorly or just are not the greatest, they tend to ask 5 questions. So this one right here, is there going to be a reverse stock split in the near future? Moving on, where is Lucid projected to be in 5 years? That one might be a good question to ask in like 2027, possibly, not right now. Sean, how many current Gravity orders are there? That's something that Lucid will not answer at all. Adrian, this one, how will the partnership with Uber aid in company growth, and how big of an impact do you expect it to have? That one, honestly, is just they're going to say 20,000 or potentially more orders. That's it. It's just going to be revenue. I don't believe that there's any like deal behind the scenes that Lucid will be able to benefit from. So that one, this question, hopefully they do ask. I know in the past, like whenever they get to like question 5 and it's more a good question and difficult, they tend to not ask it. So Paul, is the midsize platform still on target for production late 2026? Are deliveries expected to start in 2026 or 2027? Did the acquisition of the Nikola facility allow midsize to be brought forward at all? This one deserves a round of applause. This is honestly the only good question out of any of them, but I don't anticipate them to ask any further. So, and even this one right here is about profitability. So yeah, it's very low expectations for these questions. As far as events, they don't really have anything planned, so most likely it's just going to be their earnings, and potentially Mark likes to go on Bloomberg and do fireside chats after earnings, so most likely that's going to be happening this time around as well. So just be somewhat aware of that. Going into this upcoming week, 30.05% of the free float is being shorted. Works out to be 377.27 million shares overall are being shorted. So shorts have been very active recently, breaking the trend, because they went from about, it looks like, about 34% short interest to a low of 29. So they were returning quite a lot, really aiding in Lucid really moving higher. But as of the last couple of trading days, they've been really doubling down. So again, just anticipate a lot of volatility from them. Looking at the open interest, with it closing where it did, you're not going to see any bump up in the stock price because of any covering for this or from last week. Looking forward into this week, 11,000 at that 250, 34,000 at that 3, 11,000 at 350, and then 16,000 at 4. So potentially come Friday, if Lucid's around one of those levels, then ultimately you might have shorts wake up just to try to suppress it. But just to give you a quick overview from the bulls standpoint, from Friday you see a consensus for it to be roughly around $3. So not much optimism going into the week of their earnings. Bears are anticipating for it to be sub 2. So kind of a little bit higher spectrum than the anticipated 11.42%. But with it closing on Friday at 11.42, it is wedge bound between these 2 points, so this pivot and this S1. And it's been there for the last couple of trading days as well. So 260 is going to be that next strong target / resistance, and then 207 is going to be the next strong support. I'm looking at the 1-day chart. This is why the gap is a little bit wider, but I'm kind of mentioning this in this way because of Lucid's earnings. So because of their earnings, it most likely will be touching one of these. The question is, which one? So, and like I said, it's all going to come down to the future guidance. But aside from that though, where it did close on Friday was right above that 100-day moving average. So that is at 241. 50-day moving average is at 238. So it closed at 242 on Friday. So that is going to be a big deal if Lucid does break below those moving averages, because that usually does result in like a 30% swing. So that might be Shorts' plan, just to really hit it hard going into their earnings. That way it would be below that 50-day moving average. But going into this upcoming week, you do have Lucid in general very oversold, and that's from the stochastic RSI. So let me know your general thoughts on Lucid in the comments below. Where do you see things going? My estimates are, I know this might be unpopular opinion, but I still do feel that just mathematically it's not there for them to hit that 20,000. So I feel like Mark might kind of cut it a little bit, which of course the stock price will be impacted by that. But I feel like the rest of the other kind of points might be somewhat positive. So I feel like there is another partnership that Mark is going to release. How good and what magnitude, that's yet to be seen, because I'd be rather disappointed if Mark comes out and says, hey, we're actually going to be partnering with Blacklane, which is technically stuff that we've already known since April. Just Lucid itself has not announced that. Only the Saudi Arabia Lucid did, for whatever reason. They seem to, whoever's governing their social medias, it's not the same entity, and they do not talk to each other, clearly. So I think Lucid is lacking in that capacity. So again, I think it's going to come down to the future guidance. And as what you can kind of see, clearly Wall Street does not like Lucid's future guidance. So let me know your general thoughts on Lucid. Where do you see things going? Do you think it is going to be breaking finally below that 207 or potentially above that 260 mark? And when it comes down to the whole reverse stock split, that's going to be another hot topic, because I even had a comment in my last video, hey, can you honestly tell me a stock that did a reverse stock split and actually has been thriving? And I know a lot of people have asked that in the past, and there's always one or two people that always comment like, yeah, this stock, a stock that I've never heard of. Realistically and honestly, I can, without using AI, I don't believe that there is a stock that has actually done a reverse stock split to go on to thrive. But I think Lucid's kind of reverse stock split mentality of why they're doing a reverse stock split is special, and because normally a reverse stock split does occur to avoid delisting, and it's usually deficient already with NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange rules. So Lucid's kind of scenario is unique, but I don't believe it's going to be exempt from the negative sentiment of a reverse stock split. And like I've kind of mentioned, I know an unpopular opinion, but I just don't believe Mark. I don't believe that he's doing the reverse stock split to incentivize actual institutions to buy, because like, in reality, if an institution's not buying Lucid, most likely it's because of their crappy performance. Has nothing to do with kind of stipulations that they cannot buy. It's just doesn't make sense to me. So unless there is some clarity in this upcoming earnings, I feel like the negative sentiment is going to still stand with the reverse stock split. So I know I did mention quite a lot of things, and that goes to show how complex Lucid's upcoming earnings is truly going to be, because there's a lot of things that might be positive, but let's say they cut on guidance and they kind of double down on the reverse stock split mentality. Well, Wall Street's going to stick to that. And keep in mind, Wall Street generally already does hate Lucid. They hate most EVs just under the current administration. So kind of have a losing game as well going into their earnings. And one thing as well, I kind of just remember, speaking of tariffs, I know technically Canada got hit with that 35%, and Lucid did mention that potentially that tariff alone is going to really impact their bottom line, between 10 to 15% from their margin. So how is that going to affect everything? And that's one thing that honestly I have no idea why nobody's really asked that. Why is nobody asking about tariffs and how that is going to impact Lucid? Like, that's a pretty substantial deal. And last earnings, like, they brought that up as a very serious concern, but people seem to not really talk about it. Like, there's absolutely no questions as far as tariffs that I have seen so far. So people only care about stock split, partnerships, clearly profitability. Those are the hot ones. But yeah, nobody cares whatsoever about tariffs. So I don't know, maybe Lucid is exempt. Just it's only affecting Amazon, Apple, a lot of the big names, but maybe it doesn't affect Lucid. What do I know? So let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for listening to me rant. As per usual, hopefully everyone's having a good weekend. One final thing, pop over to my Patreon if you're looking for a lot of good buy signals on stocks, options, crypto, many of which have been absolutely on point. Definitely worthwhile to pop over there and take a look. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.